Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joycey Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about cluster-based modern industries or the need for developing cluster-based modern industries in India. So we would be analyzing what is the present issue, we will see what is the status of manufacturing in India, and we will also see what is the missing middle, what is the extreme two ends in manufacturing sector. We will also discuss about policy fragmentation, stimulation cell, what are the limitations and what is the way ahead and what has to be done. So we will discuss all these topics in detail in this lecture. Let us begin, but before that, this is our channel StudyIQ and we are providing pen drive courses for various competitive examinations including UPSC Civil Service Examination. If you are preparing for your UPSC Civil Service Examination 2020, you can avail our pen drive courses, which will provide 100% coverage of the UPSC syllabus, and also daily current affair updates will be provided. You can find more details from the link which is pasted on the description of this video. Also, you can visit our website for more details. So let us start. Let us first analyze what is the issue. So as we said, why there is a need for manufacturing clusters in India? There are extreme two ends. So at one end is the few large firms existing in India, large manufacturing firms, and at the other end there are many tiny firms. So the tiny firms are in large numbers and the large firms are in few numbers. But in between them there is nothing. There is a complete absence of middle or medium manufacturing industries or manufacturing clusters. So in this situation, manufacturing clusters can create a balance between large firms and tiny firms. So this is the relevance and this is the issue. So based on this, we will understand what is the status of manufacturing, why we need manufacturing clusters, and also what are the limitations. So moving on, let us first understand what is the status of manufacturing in India. In the year 2017, the GDP contribution of manufacturing sector in India was 16%. So since 1991, that is after the new economic policy adoption or after the LPG policy adoption, we see that the manufacturing sector has a stagnated growth since 1991. So after the economic reforms in 1991, the manufacturing sector has not witnessed a high growth rate. So it is stagnated. Now the only exception is during the second and the third 5-year plans. So if you see the second and the third 5-year plans, the focus of these 5-year plans were on heavy industry based industrialization. So the focus of the 5-year plan itself was on heavy industries. It gave a thrust towards manufacturing sector development in the economy. So that was the only exception. Second and third 5-year plans, when India has seen a growth rate which was satisfactory from the manufacturing sector. So only during second and third 5-year plan, manufacturing sector has become a leading sector in India. Now if we talk about the huge significance of manufacturing sector, no major economy in the world has managed to reduce poverty or to sustain growth without manufacturing driven economic growth. So in case of poverty alleviation through employment generation, providing livelihood, manufacturing sector has a huge role to play. Now, if we talk about economic growth in terms of GDP, manufacturing sector is the only sector that can immensely contribute towards a high growth of GDP or economic growth. So, in terms of economic growth and poverty alleviation, which becomes a part of economic development, both in terms of development and growth, manufacturing sector has got a huge significance. But even when there is such a huge significance for manufacturing sector, in India an industrial policy is absent. We do not have a robust industrial policy. Now let us come to the missing middle, which we discussed in the beginning. So the missing middle, what does this term indicate? At two extreme ends, we have on one end concentration of small and micro firms, and on the other end we have some large firms which are only very few in number. But something is missing in the middle. We do not have medium enterprises or we do not have what we call manufacturing clusters. So we have an absence of manufacturing clusters. And here comes the importance of a robust manufacturing policy. So a robust manufacturing policy has got its own advantages. First one, it will encourage economies of scale. So what is meant by economies of scale? Economies of scale means that when the quantity of supply or quantity of production or output increases, the marginal cost of production comes down. Suppose you manufacture 100 units. Now, after a certain point, the marginal cost of production declines. This is because you undertake production in large scale. So, economies of scale is one advantage of large scale production. So, because of an absence of a manufacturing policy, our manufacturers or our industrial sector are not able to reap the benefits of economies of scale. And economies of scale encourages the growth of small firms into bigger firms. And this will also help in filling the middle gap. So we really need a robust manufacturing policy which will help our small firms to rise to the level of bigger firms and then thereby fill the middle gap. Now, if we come to clusters, the present status of manufacturing clusters in India, India has almost 5,000 manufacturing clusters spread across the country. And within this 5,000 clusters, a majority of them falls under unorganized sector. And these clusters contribute 40% of manufacturing GDP and 50% of exports. But there is no policy that supports these clusters, or there is a lack of support from the policy makers for the development of these clusters. Now, if we talk about job creation, if we connect job creation with that of manufacturing clusters, we need a policy for modern industrial clusters, and the focus of this policy should be both on brownfield as well as greenfield, because in case of brownfield, that is already existing clusters, we have seen there are almost 5,000 clusters that are already existing in India. So development of this already existing clusters also needs due importance. Now if we talk about greenfield clusters, it is the development of new clusters. So policy makers should pay attention to both brownfield and greenfield clusters. Now, the development of these clusters will help in generating employment or creating jobs, because almost 5 to 7 million people are joining the labor force each year. So, in order to provide jobs to this 5 to 7 million people who enter the labor force every year, it is very much important to develop the manufacturing industry or manufacturing sector. And within the manufacturing industry, the middle gap or this missing middle should be completed. And this can be very well done by creating manufacturing clusters as well as by developing the already existing manufacturing clusters. Now, let us understand about policy fragmentation. What is meant by policy fragmentation and how does this affect the industrial sector or the manufacturing sector? So here the policy fragmentation means the cluster programs are administered by several ministries. So each ministry will be using different terms and conditions. Each ministry will have their own terms and conditions. So administration of these clusters are done by several ministries. For example, textile ministry, leather ministry, food ministry, MSME ministry. So it depends on what manufacturing is being undertaken. So depending on the manufacturing activity, these cluster programs are monitored and administered by different ministries. So this creates a trouble. So there are different terms and conditions. So this fragmentation should end. It should have a uniform code or uniform set of rules and regulations that will regulate and administer the cluster programs in the country. And along with that, industrial planning is also required. So industrial planning at both the center and the state level is required. And a proper policy that will address the issue of cluster-based manufacturing should fulfill the requirements of technology upgradation, skill development, market information facilitation, and design improvement. So these should be the 4 major focus points of cluster programs and policies. Now coming to a stimulation cell. So a stimulation cell for cluster development programs were recommended in the 12th 5-year plan in the year 2013. So the Planning Commission in its 12th 5-year plan had recommended for the creation of stimulation cells. So it recommended the setting up of cluster stimulation cells at the apex level, at the central level, and which should be headed by an MSME ministry. So the MSME ministry should head the stimulation cell at the apex level, and it should also be responsible for promoting cluster associations, and it also recommended at the lower levels, at the state level and also at the district level, various other stimulation cells. Now the biggest challenge for the creation and the administration of such stimulation cells is the lack of funds, or rather we can say lack of budgetary support. So this error must be rectified. Now if we look at China's example, the China's industrial development was based on effective cluster development. It adopted the cluster development strategy in order to promote industrial sector. Another example is that of Italy. So these two countries are very good examples at the global level that have excelled in manufacturing sector with the use of cluster development models. Now let us come to the way ahead, or what has to be done. So first one is to create appropriate infrastructure that helps in creation of better manufacturing environment in the country. So the poor infrastructural issues needs to be addressed properly. That is the first point. Second one is the Amrit funds. Amrit is Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation. So the Amrit funds can be properly utilized and can be given to those towns with manufacturing clusters. So this funds can also be diverted towards the development of manufacturing clusters. So this can effectively resolve the issue of funds and budgetary support. Third one is to include digital infrastructure. So digital infrastructure will eliminate intermediaries. So elimination of intermediaries necessarily means that this will raise the revenue of the firms or the manufacturers. So this is another measure that can be adopted. Now fourth one is institutional sources of credit. So access to institutional sources of credit is also a key in developing cluster based models. So at present SIDB is responsible for providing credit, but the resources of SIDB is not enough in order to undertake large scale credit disbursement. So along with SIDB, there should also be other alternatives that will provide access to institutional sources of credit. The fifth point is budgetary support. So the government should allocate more funds in the budget in order to support cluster development. The sixth one is skill development, and in this regard vocational training, vocational education etc. can be given to the youth that will equip them to meet the demands of the modern industry. Now seventh one is proper utilization of online trade. So according to various data, India has almost 350 million smartphone users. So this gives us an idea about the digital connectivity or the scope of digital connectivity in India. So in this backdrop, online trading in India has a huge potential. So e-commerce can help the MSMEs to have access to larger markets. So having a wider reach means they get better prices for their produce, their revenues increase, and they will be able to undertake better and more comprehensive manufacturing activities. And it will also provide a platform for the MSMEs to acquire cheaper inputs for their final product. So they should also make utilization of the online trading facilities. So a cluster development policy should address all these concerns and should include all these possibilities. And by developing modern manufacturing clusters, the manufacturing sector in the country can be promoted and the missing middle gap in the manufacturing sector can be effectively filled. You can find the PDF of this lecture on our website www.studyiq.com. You can follow my Facebook page for more video updates. You can also write to me at joyce.studyiq@gmail.com for any of your queries and clarifications. Thank you.